Some humiliations announce themselves loudly. They come with shouting, with slammed doors that rattle the walls, with words hurled like weapons designed to wound, to leave marks everyone can see. Mine didn't. Mine arrived politely. It came with soft laughter, light, almost kind. The kind of laughter meant to reassure, not to hurt. The kind that says this isn't cruelty, this is clarity. Vanessa didn't leave me because she hated me. She left me because she was convinced she had outgrown me. She believed she was standing still only because I was holding her back. And the worst part, she truly believed she was being kind by leaving. That belief stayed with her for years. Anyway, I am Daniel Moore. And this is my story. Before we dive deeper, go ahead and like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments where you are watching from. We will be excited to have you join our growing family of enthusiasts who enjoy the wonderful stories told on this channel. When Vanessa entered my life, she was more lost than she ever imagined. She had come to the city convinced opportunity would recognize her immediately. That intelligence, confidence, and ambition were currencies the world respected. She spoke about her future as if it were already scheduled. Instead, the city met her with indifference. Rejection emails arrived in neat, polite sentences. Interviews ended with smiles that meant nothing. Weeks passed without callbacks. I remember the first night she cried in my apartment. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly. She sat on the edge of my couch, shoulders stiff, eyes fixed on the floor. When the tears came, she wiped them away immediately, as if embarrassed by their presence. I don't understand, she said, her voice tight. I did everything right. I didn't rush to comfort her, I just sat beside her. The truth was, I understood perfectly. I noticed her not because she stood out, but because she didn't. She wasn't loud. She wasn't pretending to win. She was trying. I didn't rescue her dramatically. I stabilized her. We rewrote her resume again and again until it sounded believable. Not impressive, believable. Each word chosen carefully, stripped of exaggeration, grounded in reality. I paid for certifications she promised she would pay back someday, always saying it casually, like it didn't matter. I rehearsed interview answers with her late into the night until her confidence improved. Finally, using my contact, she got a job as a mid-level executive in a decent firm. The salary was decent enough to take care of a family of 2 people. Slowly, her life improved. And one night, she looked straight into my eyes and said, "Daniel, my life would have been wrecked if you hadn't come into it. Thanks for being the man that restored my confidence and gave my life a meaning." Our love life blossomed, at least as I thought in my mind. Unknown to me, I was standing alone in an island far away from reality, or maybe hallucinating in the ocean of non-existent love. Slowly, quietly, things began to change. As Vanessa stabilized, her gratitude thinned. Not suddenly, not obviously. It faded the way warmth leaves a room when a window is left open too long. What once felt like support began to feel like limitation. What once felt like patience began to feel like delay. She stopped asking for my opinion, not angrily, just naturally. Stopped sharing small victories with the same excitement. She started saying things like, "I didn't want to bother you," even when I was right there. My calm began to irritate her. My steady pace embarrassed her. One night it surfaced. We were sitting across from each other after dinner, the TV on but ignored. She was scrolling through her phone, smiling at something I couldn't see. "Why are you so," she paused, searching for the word, "comfortable being where you are?" I smiled softly, "Because I'm building something." She looked up then. "That's what you always say." There was no anger in her voice. Just doubt. And doubt, spoken calmly, is far more dangerous than shouting. I laughed, trying to keep it light. "Things take time." She didn't laugh back. Instead, she nodded slowly, as if confirming something to herself. Comparison had entered the room. And comparison quietly kills respect, without ever raising its voice. Richard Hale entered Vanessa's life at the exact moment impatience took root. That timing mattered more than either of us realized. Richard didn't talk about becoming successful. He spoke as if success had already shaken his hand, already signed its name beside his. There was no uncertainty in his voice, no hesitation in his language. He didn't say maybe. He didn't say one day. He spoke in conclusions. I closed that deal last quarter. They'll come around. That's how the game works. He wore expensive suits like they were nothing. No adjusting the cuffs, no checking his reflection. He dropped names casually, not to impress, but as if everyone should already know them. Executives, investors, places I'd only read about. Vanessa changed around him. It wasn't dramatic, it was subtle, and that made it worse. She laughed louder when he spoke, sat straighter at the table, leaned forward when he talked about money, about leverage, about momentum. She began correcting me in conversations. Not sharply, politely. Actually, Daniel, that's not quite how it works. She'd never done that before. One night after dinner with Richard, the three of us lingering at the table long after plates were cleared, she said something that stayed with me. Do you ever notice how some people just arrive? Her eyes were on Richard when she said it. I said nothing. She turned to look at me then, sensing the silence. I don't mean it badly, she added quickly. I just mean some people don't struggle as much. She smiled like that softened it. It didn't. She questioned my plans. When I tried to explain and discuss my plans, she rolled her eyes just enough for me to notice. She humiliated me without realizing it. But I thought she knew exactly what she was doing. You're still working on that? Laughing lightly. The room went quiet for half a second. Richard laughed. Not cruelly. Confidently. That's cute, man, he said, raising his glass. Vision is important. Everyone laughed with him. I smiled. Swallowed it. She started comparing me out loud. Richard already closed another deal. Richard understands how the world works. Richard doesn't wait. Then she asked the question that stripped everything bare. Daniel, why are you always waiting? I told myself patience would fix it. That consistency would prove me right. That time would speak for me. Vanessa believed patience was the problem. To her, waiting meant losing. When Vanessa finally left, she didn't cry. She explained. She sat across from me, calm, composed, almost gentle. I've waited long enough, she said, folding her hands neatly. I need certainty. I nodded, still trying to understand. Ambition without results frightens me, she continued. I don't want to wake up 10 years from now still hoping. She smiled while she said it. Not sadly. Not apologetically. Then she laughed lightly. I didn't plan for Richard to happen, she said, but here we are. That confidence crushed me. Not because she chose him, but because she was sure she'd chosen correctly. She packed carefully. No rushing. No shaking hands. Each item folded felt deliberate. When she closed the door, she didn't look back. And the silence she left behind was louder than any argument we never had. Vanessa didn't just marry Richard. She announced him. Their wedding wasn't a private promise between two people. It was a declaration, a public statement, proof displayed in high resolution that she had chosen correctly. The ceremony took place at a coastal resort so pristine it felt artificial, like the ocean had been polished for photographs. White arches, imported flowers, linen so expensive it looked fragile. The kind of place where beauty isn't accidental, it's purchased. Guests arrived from different countries, not relatives, not childhood friends. Investors, executives, people whose names came with titles. Designers were mentioned more often than vows. Champagne flowed like it was trying to make a point. This is abundance. Every detail whispered the same message: arrival. I didn't attend, but I watched. Because people made sure I watched. Photos appeared everywhere: Instagram, LinkedIn, group chats I hadn't muted fast enough. Vanessa in white, glowing, unburdened, not nervous, not uncertain, confident, certain, victorious. Richard stood beside her with his hand firm on her waist, not protective, not affectionate. Possessive, like he was presenting an acquisition. Someone tagged me accidentally. A group shot. Vanessa laughing, head tilted back. Richard leaning in, whispering something into her ear. The caption read, "When patience finally pays off." I understood the message immediately. This wasn't just about love. She hadn't simply chosen Richard. She had rejected everything I represented. At the reception, I later learned, Richard gave a speech. He didn't talk about romance. He talked about decisiveness. About knowing when to stop waiting. About choosing momentum over hesitation. About betting on certainty. Vanessa laughed loudly. Someone shouted, "Say it louder." Richard did. And in that moment, without my name ever being mentioned, I became a lesson. From the outside, Richard's life looked flawless. A bigger house in a gated neighborhood. Private clubs. Elite circles that spoke in hushed tones and expensive confidence. Vanessa moved differently now. Her posture changed. Her laughter sharpened. Her silences felt deliberate. She spoke about me occasionally, always casually, always dismissively. "Oh, Daniel," she'd say, swirling wine in a glass. "He's a good man, just stuck." People nodded. The years that followed were unkind. I worked multiple jobs. Delivered packages in the early mornings. Cleaned offices at night when no one was watching. I tried ventures that failed quietly. No applause. No sympathy. No one to tell me I'd tried hard enough. I watched others succeed faster. People less prepared. Less patient. More confident. Rejection piled up. Emails unanswered, calls never returned, doors closing without explanation. And with each failure, her laughter grew heavier in my imagination. I stopped posting updates. Stopped sharing plans. Stopped announcing ideas before they were ready. Silence became my strategy. I started learning. Not success stories. Failures. I studied companies that collapsed. I learned how money moved quietly. How power avoided attention. How real influence never introduced itself loudly. Failures became my textbooks. And slowly it paid off. I built wealth silently. Moved from startups to acquisitions. Bought struggling companies no one believed in. I didn't arrive loudly. I arrived systematically. Meanwhile, Ardente's Global Holdings, a company that dealt in logistics services, was coming apart from the inside. It wasn't a loud collapse. There were no sudden shutdowns. No unpaid salaries making headlines. No public scandal. On the surface, Ardente still looked solid, fleet contracts intact, long-term clients renewing, quarterly reports polished and reassuring. It was the kind of company investors trusted because it had always been there. But underneath, something was wrong. Vendor payments were delayed without explanation. Operational costs kept rising while delivery efficiency declined. Short-term loans were taken, repaid, then taken again, each time justified as temporary cash flow alignment. The financial statements were flawless. Too flawless. Margins shrank quietly. Cash reserves thinned. Yet executive compensation grew larger, more confident, more insulated. This wasn't mismanagement. It was design. The rot lived at the top. Ardenti's top management officers, the people entrusted with strategy, oversight, and accountability, were the ones moving money where it shouldn't go. Complex consulting fees were approved without scrutiny. Subsidiaries paid sister companies for services no one could clearly define. Contracts were inflated, then quietly renewed by the same signatures, quarter after quarter. Compliance reports never changed. Audit approvals came too easily. Warnings, when they appeared, were softened before reaching the board. This wasn't a system failing upward. It was a system being milked downward. Executives protected one another. Questions were buried in committees. Anyone who pushed too hard was transferred, paid off, or encouraged to leave for personal reasons. Outwardly, Ardenti's was stable. Internally, it was bleeding, slowly, deliberately. I didn't know the people behind it. I only noticed the symptoms. A distressed asset brief mentioned Ardenti's in passing. An institutional investor quietly reduced exposure. A logistics partner delayed renewal without explanation. Individually, none of it meant much. Together, it formed a pattern. And patterns are invitations. The founding shareholders got drained. They didn't want an investigation. They didn't want attention. They wanted out. Quietly, they began seeking investors willing to acquire the company without noise, without delay, without questions that arrived too early. That's when I moved. I formed a consortium, private equity funds, holding firms, institutional capital, separate names, single intent. Not too long the deal was completed and the takeover happened. Ardenti's global holdings has been sold. No celebration. No announcement. Just new ownership. And a silence that felt almost respectful. But it wasn't respect. It was patience. And patience, when paired with preparation, always collects its due. For 5 months, I ran Ardenti's global holdings without ever stepping into the building. No introduction. No photographs. No announcements. To most of the company, the chairman didn't exist. Ownership had changed, yes, but quietly. Share registries updated, board seats rebalanced, voting rights redistributed through entities that looked ordinary, distant, harmless. I operated by proxy. Every instruction passed through one person. The new managing director. He was the only executive who knew who I was. I chose him carefully, quiet, disciplined, allergic to attention. A man who understood that real authority didn't need applause. His appointment alone unsettled the old executives. They felt the shift before they could explain it. The restructuring began immediately. Not aggressively. Methodically. Expense approvals were centralized. Vendor contracts were reviewed. Cash flow controls tightened. Committees were dissolved and reformed. Legacy reporting structures were flattened. Approval thresholds were lowered in some areas and raised sharply in others. Top management noticed the changes but misread them. They thought it was cosmetic. A show for investors. A temporary tightening before things returned to normal. They were wronged. Within weeks, long-standing, consulting arrangements were paused pending review. Certain subsidiaries were merged, then closed. Access to discretionary budgets was quietly revoked. Then came the audit. Not announced as an investigation. Not framed as a crackdown. It was presented as routine. A comprehensive financial health review, ordered by management to align reporting with global best practices. The auditors arrived without drama. They traced money without asking permission. Followed approvals without warning. Mapped transactions the way surgeons map nerves. I received updates weekly. Not names. Patterns. 3 senior officers repeatedly approving non-standard transfers. 2 compliance signatures recurring across unrelated transactions, 1 executive-level directive overriding internal controls more than 30 times. The auditors documented everything. The auditors submitted their sealed report to the board. Soon it was time for the annual general meeting. That was when the audit reports would be made public. For 5 months, the guilty laughed, worked, and congratulated themselves, unaware they had already been measured, mapped, and boxed in. They thought the company had changed direction. They didn't realize it had changed ownership. And ownership had been watching. Then the day for the annual general meeting arrived. I hadn't planned to be there early. I rarely needed to be anywhere early anymore. But something in me wanted to see the room before it filled with certainty. The annual general meeting was held at Ardenti's headquarters, glass, steel, confidence polished into architecture. Security was tighter than usual. Executives moved with purpose. Assistants whispered timelines into earpieces. I walked in unnoticed. No badge. No entourage. No title announced. Just a man in a neutral suit, standing slightly apart from the rhythm of the room. Then I saw them. Richard walked in first. Tall, relaxed, expensive watch catching the light as if it wanted attention. He moved like someone who belonged everywhere he stepped. His laughter reached people before he did. And beside him, Vanessa. For a moment the room tilted. She looked finished. Not in the way people end, but in the way they arrive at what they always wanted. Tailored dress, calm confidence, the posture of someone who believed the world had finally confirmed her choices. I hadn't known. I hadn't connected Ardenti's to them. Hadn't traced that line. Hadn't expected my past to be sitting in my present. Vanessa saw me. Recognition flickered brief, surprised, then settled into something familiar. Amusement. She leaned into Richard and whispered. They both looked at me. Then they smiled. They approached slowly, deliberately, like this was a moment meant to be enjoyed. Well, Vanessa said, eyes scanning me openly, this is unexpected. Richard looked around theatrically. You lost. I said nothing. Vanessa folded her arms. Daniel, this is a shareholder meeting. You can't just wander into places like this. Richard laughed. Let me guess, delivery, maintenance. A couple of nearby executives glanced over. Someone smirked. I always said, Vanessa continued, voice light, that you struggled with timing. Richard leaned closer. Man, this is embarrassing. You should leave before security notices. Others joined in. A senior manager frowned. Sir, are you supposed to be here? An assistant whispered loudly enough to be heard. Do we have clearance for him? Someone chuckled. Another voice added, maybe he's waiting for someone. Vanessa watched it unfold. She enjoyed it. This, she said quietly, almost kindly, is why I left. That sentence landed harder than anything else. I felt the room shrink. The years collapse inward. Every quiet failure. Every swallowed word. I didn't defend myself. Didn't explain. I just stood there, still calm, anonymous, while the room decided who I was. A nobody. An intruder. A mistake. They laughed. Minutes felt like hours. The room finally quieted. Phones were lowered. Papers shuffled nervously. Even the most confident executives stopped talking. Then the moderator, a professional man with a clipped tone, spoke. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending today's annual general meeting. Before we begin, we have a brief procedural announcement. I didn't flinch. I didn't adjust my suit. I stood where I had been, invisible, calm, collecting every detail. The moderator continued, glancing at a few board members for confirmation. Our new chairman will now preside over the meeting. A pause, deliberate, weighty. And that chairman is... Heads turned in mild anticipation, polite curiosity. Some even smirked, certain it was another corporate insider. Daniel Moore's. The room froze. Whispers erupted immediately, papers rustled, coffee cups trembled. Faces paled, eyes darted. Richard laughed, a short, sharp bark of disbelief. What that can't be. Vanessa's hand went to her chest. For a moment, I saw the faintest flicker of hesitation. Her perfectly composed smile faltered. Not much, just enough to betray that she recognized the reality of what she'd underestimated. A few executives whispered, Daniel Moore. Impossible. They said he wasn't involved in anything. Who even is he? I took a step forward, slowly, precisely, every motion deliberate. The room responded instinctively. Respect, confusion, all rolled into a single heavy tension. Richard's eyes widened. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Words failed him. Vanessa's jaw tightened. She straightened her jacket as if to steady herself, but it did nothing to hide the shock. No one else spoke. The moderator gestured politely, opening the floor to the agenda, but all attention had shifted. I didn't acknowledge them. I didn't need to. My presence alone carried the weight of what had been quietly built over months. The room, which had mocked and dismissed me minutes before, now measured me. Every glance, every whisper, every assumption I had silently catalogued over the past 5 months was about to be answered, not with words, but with facts. The contrast was sharp, almost cruel in its inevitability. The invisible man had become the authority. The one they had mocked, assumed irrelevant, and laughed at was now in command. Even Vanessa, with her poised confidence, could not hide the momentary falter. Even Richard, the man whose laughter had once humiliated me, froze like a child caught in a truth he could not spin. The room waited, breathless. And then it began. The moderator stepped aside. From the corner of the room, 3 figures emerged. Men and women in sharp, dark suits carrying thick folders and tablets, professional, calm, expressionless. On behalf of the Independent Audit Committee, the lead auditor announced, voice measured, precise, we will present the findings of a 6-month forensic review of Ardenti's global holdings. The words forensic review landed in the room like a gunshot. The screens flickered to life. Timelines, charts, flow diagrams. Financial transactions traced from one account to another, layers of numbers that spoke louder than any accusation. The auditors didn't name anyone yet, not a single person. The room was silent, tense. Every executive leaned forward, trying to match numbers to faces, names to positions. I listened quietly, absorbing every detail. My eyes caught Richard at the very front row. He was uncomfortable and looked very uneasy. I didn't know he worked at Ardenti's, nor did I know he was a top executive of the company. The auditors continued calmly, professionally. Each slide tightened the net, showing coordinated financial misconduct. The evidence was unassailable. Patterns that had been invisible to most eyes were now plain. The top management shifted uncomfortably. Some leaned back, others swallowed hard. They knew they were being mapped. Their participation was undeniable, but the names remained hidden for now. Vanessa watched, frozen. Her laughter from years ago, the casual amusement she had displayed while mocking me, seemed to fade into uncertainty. Her eyes widened, the first crack in the armor she had built around herself. Richard's confident posture wavered. He adjusted his cufflinks, cleared his throat, tried to appear composed, but the numbers on the screen were undeniable. The auditors spoke slowly, deliberately. These actions represent coordinated financial misconduct, breaches of fiduciary duty, and intent to defraud. No names yet, just roles, evidence, and inevitability. And then the moderator stepped forward again. Ladies and gentlemen, the culprits will now be formally disclosed. A hush fell over the room. I felt nothing but calm, no gloating, no satisfaction, just the quiet certainty that had carried me through years of failure, patience, and silent preparation. Names appeared on the screen. Richard Hale, Marcus Bell, CFO, Evelyn Crane, head of compliance. Vanessa's hand went to her mouth. Shock, horror, recognition. Richard's face drained of color. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Words failed him. Marcus and Evelyn sat rigid, unable to disguise the panic that had built quietly in their veins. The auditors didn't flinch. They didn't explain. They just continued. Evidence connected to each name, unassailable, undeniable. Security moved quickly. Richard was escorted out. Marcus and Evelyn were detained, not violent, not theatrical, just factual, procedural. Vanessa remained seated, staring. Her poised confidence was gone. The world she had built with casual laughter, mockery, and assumed superiority collapsed around her. And I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. The truth had done its work. The arrests were swift and methodical. Richard Hale, Marcus Bell, Evelyn Crane. The authorities had everything they needed: audits, transaction trails, emails, signatures. No one questioned the evidence. No one tried to spin excuses that could hold in court. In the months that followed, the courts moved efficiently. Richard was sentenced to 5 years for financial fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Marcus received 4 years. Evelyn, 2 years, both for their direct roles in defrauding the company and its investors. Their names were printed in newspapers and headlines. The story was cold and factual. A corporate house of cards built on greed had collapsed. Vanessa, she was untouched legally, but that didn't save her from consequence. She called me one evening. I didn't expect it. The number was unfamiliar, but the voice was unmistakable. "Daniel," she began, tentative, fragile. I didn't interrupt. I wanted to say I'm sorry, she continued. For everything, for the way I treated you, for leaving, for laughing I shouldn't have. I listened quietly. "I understand if you don't want to talk to me," she said, voice cracking. I had to say it." I paused slowly, calmly. "It doesn't matter," I said finally. "That was the past. I've moved forward, so have you in your own way. But what happened, what you chose, that was your life. I've lived mine." There was silence on the line. Then a shaky breath. I lost everything, Daniel," she whispered. "Everything I thought I wanted. I was so sure I was wrong." I didn't respond. It wasn't my business anymore. Her regrets, her losses, they were hers to feel. And as I hung up, I realized something quietly satisfying. Patience, strategy, and silent work had carried me further than any show of force could. Vanessa had chosen impatience, assumptions, and admiration of appearances. That choice had built her world, and it had crumbled in the same way she had once laughed at me. I continued quietly running the company, guiding its recovery, stabilizing its operations, growing its reach. My success was neither loud nor performative. It was methodical, invisible, undeniable. I acquired more companies, grew bigger, and spread my reach into Europe, Asia, and Africa. As for Vanessa, she never recovered from the shock. She now works as a middle-level administrator at one of my companies in New York City. And in that calm certainty, I understood something essential. Some humiliations arrive politely. Some victories arrive silently. And some lessons, those you build yourself, last a lifetime. Vanessa's laughter, Richard's arrogance, the mockery of everyone who underestimated me. It was all a chapter in my past. The future, however, was mine. I didn't gloat, I didn't seek revenge. I simply continued. And that, I realized, was the most powerful statement of all. If you found this story interesting, please remember to like the video and hit the subscribe button. Also turn on the notifications so you don't miss out on any of our amazing videos. And lastly, endeavor to share the video to your friends. Thank you and see you in the next video.